Every horror movie that manages to stay in our minds years after we've seen it always has a real-life context. A story that was able to inspire our fears, and the Final Destination saga is no exception. Stay with me, and I'll tell you the real case that inspired these movies, where we never see the monster and we don't need to in order to believe it exists. Because we all know that death, the eternal villain of Final Destination, will come for all of us someday. But sometimes, like in the story I'm about to tell you, it becomes a relentless hunter that takes people down one by one. Everyone who thinks they could have avoided it. You will learn the details of my investigation into the case of the graduates from St. Patrick's School in 1993. A group of young people who decided to travel through Northern Europe to celebrate their friendship and rescued from the snow a very unusual woman, a very particular woman. That there could be events from the future, and yes, death, lurking and violent, was waiting for all of them. However, out of mercy, the woman gave them 6 of the 7 sacred runes that prevent the final fate. As long as you don't lose them, as long as you heed their warnings. But nothing went as they expected. And don't even think about missing the ending. I promise not to disappoint you, because I am the documentalist, and this is the real story behind Final Destination. Final Destination, an original film from the year 2000, became a saga that is releasing its 6th movie. And it left us with a clear lesson. No matter how many times you've avoided the plane, the bridge, or the roller coaster, death always catches up with you. With its mix of unlucky teenagers and deadly traps worthy of a satanic engineering workshop, it made an entire generation develop a collective trauma. With the trucks carrying logs on the highway? Because yes, death may be inevitable. But in this franchise, it's also very, very creative. Try to see things from my perspective. You'll see. One of my subscribers tried to write a biography about an Inger Laisbacherströmm, an obvious Norwegian with a reputation for being powerful among the most select occult circles in the world. His attempt to convince her failed. If there's something she doesn't like, it's publicity. It's something that often happens to me with real witches. They don't want to be interviewed, bothered, or made known. Anyway, the point is that he was able to talk to her, and to my surprise, she confirmed that she had it in her possession. 3 of the 7 Scapu runes, capable of keeping death away from anyone who possesses even just one. But if you have the complete set, if all 7 runes are brought together, are they capable of reversing the aging of whoever possesses them? Just imagine, those carved pieces of bone are worth more than the Mona Lisa. And since it wasn't known for sure who created them, only that they were found in 1927 by the builders who were constructing the church in that little village. In Norway, it's Scapu, which gives its name to the magical runes. Well, I told them to put themselves in my place, because as a researcher of the occult, if those runes existed, I had to try to decipher their symbols and establish who made them. Even to be able to make new ones. And then I did it. I decided to set out on the journey to look for Inger Lais. But understand that death doesn't like people knowing about the runes either. And it would make me know it forcefully. But let's go to the real story that inspired Final Destination. It was 1993, and the 5 friends from St. Patrick were only 18 years old. Rich, good-looking, and with a world of opportunities ahead of them. They all seemed to say, "Our life will be great. Let's live this last adventure together before the adult world separates us onto different paths." 17 days after leaving their native Ireland, they arrived in Norway. Destiny? Any unique place off the traditional tourist routes. But the twins John and James O'Donnell saw that woman fading away in the snow in the middle of nowhere. They thought she was dead. And it's no wonder. The cold went right to the bone. Mary, Catherine, and Anne ran to see if she was still breathing, and in just a moment they realized there was something different. The lady was asleep, half covered by snow. She wasn't wearing a glove on one of her hands, and her fingers weren't frozen. They noticed a distant cabin. James carried her by the shoulders while his brother held her legs. And finally, they entered the building only to realize that the only photo decorating the wall was of that woman. To everyone's surprise, she yawned and sat up with a start, asking, "What happened?" "I was going to the post office and then I don't remember anything. I think I fainted." Catherine, who is undoubtedly the most mature of the group of five, told him what had happened and introduced everyone. She looked at the clock on the wall and hurriedly said to them, "Thank you, I'm Inger Lais. You can stay as long as you want, there's food in the pantry, and you can light a fire. I have to go to the post office. It's an urgent matter. I only have 3 hours because on Mondays they close at 5. The twins answered in unison. "Mrs. Inger Lais, today is Saturday." The woman screamed in anguish and began to cry, saying, "Poor family, my God, why do you let death do this to me?" "Could I have avoided it? I could have avoided it." And, trembling from crying, she took an envelope out of her pocket that said, "Urgent delivery, Johansson family, Lillehammer village, Inger Lais." She tore it open and let 4 yellowish bone runes with carved symbols fall out from inside. She showed them to them and said, "Could I have prevented her and her children from dying in such a horrible way?" Anne wanted to hug her, but she shouted, "Don't touch me." "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you." And she immediately put on the glove to pat young Anne, who had been surprised by the reaction. Catherine confronted her harshly, saying, "Look, ma'am, we saved you from freezing to death. We dragged you here and now we have to put up with you yelling at us. You should be grateful and calm down a bit." "Is she delirious?" Something in the young woman's clear eyes. She saw herself, and taking a deep breath, she told them the following. "She was not going to die. I've been unconscious in the snow since Monday. I'm hungry, cold, my back hurts a little, but believe me, I was not going to die. And they can't touch me. Why? Would we see it? If you touch me, you and I would see exactly how you're going to die. Don't you believe me?" They look at each other as if I were crazy. All right. When they get back to town, someone will surely be saying that the truck with the Johansson family rolled over on the road on Thursday afternoon. And the woman who was driving and her 2 little children were crushed to death. But not the baby. She was strapped in tightly in the back. She died from the cold. That's how I saw it would happen when our hands accidentally touched at the market. The 5 of them held their heads. They were coming from the village. They had spent Friday night there, and there was nothing else people talked about except that dead family. Catherine asked him, "So, is she some kind of psychic?" "I don't believe in that stuff." "Inger Lais," she replied, looking her in the eyes. "I'm more than that. I'm cursed. Since I was a child, I had these minor powers. Premonitions. Who was going to arrive in the village if a woman was going to get pregnant? Things like that. Until Marco came to build the church, he stayed in this cabin and we fell in love. Then he found the runes. He stayed almost a year and gave me 6 of the 7 before he left. He kept the other one as a memento of our love. That photo over there, the one on the wall, is of the two of us. How old do you think I am? Anne, she said shyly, 35 or 40. But the woman dried her tears and answered calmly, no. We took that photo in 1927. And if I'm being honest with you, it's because no one will believe you. Anyway, sometimes I don't even believe it myself. I realized something had changed when Marco's letter arrived. It was 2 years after he left for Italy to work. But the entire building collapsed in Rome, and he was the only one who survived without any injuries. I remember the letter said, I lifted 100 or 200 tons of floors and walls that were crushing me with just my arms. And when I finally got out, I knew it was the rune hanging from my neck that saved me from dying. It was hot, as if I had put it in the oven. For more than 2 hours, he told them what he had experienced. He confessed to them that he was born in 1890, that he was 37 years old when he received the 6 runes. And from that day, in 1927, he stopped aging. Her clairvoyance increased 1,000-fold, but only for events related to death, as if the damned Grim Reaper had gotten angry with her. She couldn't touch anyone because she saw exactly how they were going to die, as if she were there. Mary was the only one who wasn't fascinated by the story. She thought she was a liar and made faces of displeasure. The woman told them that her beloved Marco never returned. He wrote to her in 1959 desperate. He had discovered that the symbols of the rune meant something about rejuvenation, that the 7 together could achieve it, but he didn't find out more. Something in the man had changed, and he only intended to buy the other 6 from her. He said he needed the money he had, an interested investor, and things like that. He found out that he sold his for $500,000, a fortune for those times. Just days later, death came looking for him. Without the rune, the weight cost him dearly, and finally a roof collapsed on him and crushed him. A small one, he was operating a construction crane that failed, and 7 floors below Marco was walking. As the documentarian, I had already learned part of that story. I didn't need too much prior research. I knew from my contact that Inger Lais was still living there, and that's understandable. There aren't many people to reach out to in that place. But something clearly, I didn't want to make this video, because it started with simple flight delays, then the inexplicable loss of my passport, and finally, the warning. The night before I left, I saw her in the gardens of my house, right in front, staring straight at my window. She can't enter my house. At least not until my time comes. Besides, I have some extra protections. Just in case. I usually sleep with the 7-hour video of the St. Benedict medal chants. And no spirit can come in, at least not one like this. But from a distance, death made sure of itself. That I had no doubt at all that she was watching me. She appeared as if she were a damn perfect Halloween costume, dressed in black, very tall, and with a shining scythe. She pointed at me with her finger, moved the steel blade slightly, and disappeared. 2 crows crashed into my window seconds later, and so on. Needless to say, the terrible noise startled me, but it also told me I was on the right track. Going back to 1993, and as I told you about the 5, Mary was the only one who thought Inger Lais was a liar. She would soon ask them for money in exchange for selling them a rune. So she told the others that they were going to touch her hand as soon as she took off one of her gloves. The others were horrified, not only because it was rude. The woman was preparing them a dinner, and they appreciated her company and her stories, also because they believed in her and didn't want to know how they were going to die. But nothing stopped Mary from going straight to her as soon as Inger Lais took off her gloves to wash some potatoes and tried to grab her hand. To make matters worse, Catherine went after her to stop it, and both of them in the struggle barely brushed one of the woman's fingers. And suddenly, all three of them were on a street in an unknown place. Mary started to apologize, but Inger Lais interrupted her, shouting, "There's no time for this! This is how you're going to die!" Stupid. It's too late for regrets now. Try to memorize everything you see. A helicopter is flying overhead, and police officers are putting up barriers in the distance. Something's going on. Catherine listened to him right away and started saying out loud everything she saw. "I'm not sure where we are, but it looks like we're in England, not Ireland. There's a white truck, Ford Cargo. It's on the street near me. This place is full of people. There's a couple with a yellow baby stroller," Mary said, terrified. More police officers are running over there in the distance. "No, we're not alone. The twins and Anne are walking over there. Do they see us? Does that mean the 5 of us will be in this place?" And then they heard the explosion. A large piece of iron from the truck went through Catherine and decapitated James. June was struck in the chest by the baby carriage with such force that his ribs stuck out on both sides. And the shockwave brought thousands of shards and broken fragments that entered through Mary and Anne's eyes. She also had her ears and entire scalp torn off. They all were thrown through the air, and they fell, dead, forming a sea of corpses with the other hundreds of people who were nearby. A white light, like a camera flash, brought them back to the cabin, in a fit of hysteria. Inger Lais was moving back and forth in the kitchen, still angry, until she finally told them she was going to bed. A few hours. Catherine and Mary told the others what they had seen and experienced. No one had dinner that night, nor could they sleep. A few months ago, I landed in Norway. Several long hours later, I was in Scapu, or as the locals say in Norwegian, Scapu. I visited the church and asked for directions to cross the snow until I found Inger Lais's cabin. But the locals made the sign of the cross every time I mentioned her. Far from intimidating me, that gave me quite a bit of satisfaction. Why? Because a young man saw his father invoke God and mocked the man, telling me, "Entro aduna en vampire," which in Norwegian means, he thinks she is a vampire. To myself, I thought the stories must be true. She doesn't age. And I would say, smiling, I rode that snowmobile that I rented from the teenager for a few crowns and set off in the indicated direction. Of course, it wasn't as simple as I make it sound. Why? Because a few kilometers later, I came across a reindeer split into 3 clean cuts made with a huge metal blade. Yes, just like a scythe would do. And when I turned around, I saw her coming, floating while her black robe touched the ground, leaving no trace in the snow. In case you didn't know, death loves the sound of the French language. So trying to stay calm, I said to her, "What if your love dies?" And I blurted out, "Je ne demande qu'une chose, accorde-moi le temps de dire mes prières, Dieu. Mais si ce n'est pas le cas, laisse-moi passer." Or speak quickly and briefly and just tell me once and for all. For everything I had. What does our language mean? If it's my time slender death, I only ask you to give me time to say my prayers to God, but if it's not, let me go on. Or speak soon. Speak briefly and once and for all. Tell me what you want. I'm not gonna lie to you. I had my hand on the accelerator, but since I didn't see the scythe, I calmed down. Then he stopped in front of me and said, "Tell the one who avoids me with the runes of Aral to stop offering them, or when I come to look for them. Won't it be with my friendly face that I'll be waiting for him?" What does it mean? Tell the one who avoids me with Harold's runes to stop giving them as gifts, or when I go to look for them, I won't do it. With my friendly face. I replied that I was only afraid of God, and that, for her peace of mind, I didn't plan to carry one of those runes to avoid her. Then she said the only possible fate was to face judgment, and then she disappeared. 20 minutes later, I saw the tall, angular roofs of the cabin. From the smoking chimney, I knew she was there. Going back to that early morning in 1993, Inger Lais got up from sleep and found the 5 of them in the grip of anguish. She looked them up and down and thought, "God, they're just kids." So she made a plan with them, a rune for each one, with the promise that, instead of avoiding the place of their death, they had to find where it was going to happen and save as many people as possible. Then they had to come back to bring them. He swore to them before God that immortality was far from being a blessing, and he watched them leave at dawn, comforted and grateful. 3 years later, he found out. 1996, Manchester, England. A white Ford cargo truck with 1,500 kilos of explosives blew up and destroyed the city center. A helicopter captured images of the terrible shockwave. The police had tried to close off the area after a call from the Irish Republican Army terrorists themselves, who announced what they were going to do. Around them, men and women, many with babies and children by the hand, were walking without knowing anything until the 5 appeared and shouted, "Bomb! Run that way! Bomb!" That day, there were no deaths. Inexplicably, those who warned stayed until the end, and although they were shaken violently, they got up and left there in silence. A few months later, only Catherine and Mary kept the promise to return the runes. Why does Inger Lais still have only 3 of them and didn't go to look for the others? Let me tell you. I didn't need to knock on her door. The noise from the snowmobile made her come out to meet me. It's true, she looks 40 years old. Besides, she's beautiful, very beautiful, although her blue eyes look sad. The weather makes wearing gloves on your hands not look strange. In fact, that's how it should be. I introduced myself, insisting just enough. When I told him about my encounter with death, he told me I should do something like that, since she used the Romanian word, clarbasador. I answered honestly that I wasn't a seer or a sorcerer or anything like that I work from the shadows to serve the light, and that my investigations have forced me to meet spiritual beings, mostly ghosts, demons, or renegades. And that had left a mark on me in some way. They know it, they realize it, they notice it, and more often than I would like, sometimes they manifest themselves like when I recorded this video. Anyway, I explained to him that I wasn't there for his evidence, but to study the engravings of the runes. To try to understand them and, if possible, find out if they have any other conjured function. Maybe it was because of the loneliness of isolation, or because if he left me out there, I would freeze to death. But the truth is that Inger Lais trusted me and let me in. Before I went to look for them, she served me hot chocolate and I asked her why. I had told my contact that only 3 of the 6 runes she once had were left, and the answer? The answer surprised me. She shrugged her shoulders and with incredible ease told me that's just how it has to be. You see, David, once you have one of these runes, you can't age or die. Is it true? If your fate was marked, you avoid death, but only until you lose it or someone steals it from you. Well, it catches up with you as soon as it realizes you don't have it anymore. Do you understand? Catherine and Mary returned them to me. Poor things. I didn't know. I hadn't even thought about the fact that Marco avoided being crushed and in the end barely sold his rune. Death claimed him violently. The lost time and that roof collapsed on him while he was walking down the street. And what happened with these girls, my God, it can't be a coincidence. And shedding a few tears, he added, and I feel guilty for having accepted that return. I'll say it again, I didn't know. And he told me that Catherine was the first. As soon as she returned to Ireland after giving her the rune, she went to visit an aunt who was in a nursing home. Without knowing that morning, one of the elderly people had played with a valve on the heating boiler. Another complained about the cold during visiting day. So the nurse thought it would be a brilliant idea to turn the temperature up to the maximum, thinking it would only be for a few minutes. Just to warm up the place so the relatives would find it nice and warm when they arrived. But her boss called her to tell her she was fired. That the old house for the elderly was so old and needed so much maintenance that he couldn't keep up with the repairs and staff expenses. Just at that moment, Catherine walked in and didn't even greet her aunt. The young woman made a gesture because of the heat. Because the air had gotten so thick in there, and then the huge old boiler exploded. The heavy pressure door shot out like a bullet and hit her straight in the stomach. Catherine saw that she had a hole going right through her. Just like in the vision, but much bigger. Her eyes filled with blood, she let out a chilling scream of pain, and then she fell dead. And Mary, poor Mary? Only a few hours later did she find out what had happened to Catherine. She couldn't believe her friend was gone, and she suspected that without the rune in her possession, death was hunting her. She should have died impaled by glass shards. So she thought that if she stayed away from glass, she would be safe, and that made her paranoid and withdrawn. A few days later, her parents forcibly took her out of the room where she had secluded herself. They covered the windows and mirrors with blankets and tape for extra safety. Even though she screamed and kicked, they put her in the car and headed to the office of the best psychiatrist in the city to have her evaluated. A few minutes later, the McDowell Glassworks truck left fully loaded. Apparently, Mary's father found him in the middle of the road. The truck carrying the glass was moving slowly, so he honked the horn to get it to let him pass. When she saw him ahead, she panicked, sensed she would die, and somehow knew the truck's cargo would end up crushing her, so she took advantage of the fact that the vehicle was moving slowly. She threw herself out of the car and rolled on the asphalt. A pickup truck coming behind had to make a sudden maneuver to avoid running her over, crashing into the light pole, which bent and caused the old lamp with thick glass to fall and shatter from the impact onto the young woman. She didn't have time to put her hands in front of her face when she lifted her head and saw them. They were already there, right in her eyes, piercing her like dancing spears. Screaming, she got up but fell again after a few meters. On the opposite lane, a truck ran her over, crushing the glass shards embedded in her as it passed over her head. It was not a good way to die. Inger Lais never came back to claim the runes. He finally understood the wild and vengeful mechanics of death when you use magical and forbidden elements to evade it. We became friends in that cabin. The Norwegian lady looks 40, but she's actually 135 years old, and talking with her was extremely interesting. I must say that magic couldn't have fallen into better hands. She leads a simple life. Her gifts are both a curse, and that place keeps her away from prying visitors. She confessed to me that she has a terrible fear of death and that she hasn't seen her own. But she senses that the specter of the scythe will have no mercy on her the day she no longer has the runes in her possession. She brought the 3 she had left to let me study their engravings. The symbols were practically the same on each one, with slight variations. Death had told me that these were the runes of someone named Harold. And it didn't take me long to realize that they belonged to Harold Hatradi, the ruthless Viking king of Norway, since 1046. The engravings were a mix of Eastern and Nordic styles. No doubt the ruthless one took some sorcerer prisoner during his travels through Russia and Constantinople, or from battles against the Arabs. And by the time he returned to reclaim the throne of Norway, he already carried the runes with him, crafted by someone deeply knowledgeable in occult rituals. Inger Lais bid me farewell affectionately. Once at home, I consulted more books. Not by chance, one of my sons is named Ragnar. I have copies of all the Viking spells, and I was able to decipher the symbols. According to my research, all the runes prevent the bearer from dying. In addition, each one of them gives a quality. One gives strength, another determination, and the third, intuition. But the most interesting thing is that Mako, Inger Lais' old love, was wrong. And everything that has been written about them in occult circles is incorrect. They are not 7, they are 721 runes carved in human bone. Whoever has just 7 of them will be able to rejuvenate. The Norwegian lady has 3. I know that one, the one Marco sold, is in the hands of a private collector in London. One in the possession of N, and the other 2 are with the twins. The tunnel and the remaining 714 are a mystery. Not so much. There are reports of people who have survived catastrophes or accidents where they should have died without a doubt. But they walked out of there. Houses, even churches, that withstood disasters and bombings. My calculations say that most of them are here in America. They were highly valued among sailors who crossed the ocean in times when ships often sank before reaching the shore. The story of Inger Lais and the 5 from Ireland strongly inspired the Final Destination movie. The time gained from death irritates her. Every day they evade her using these ancient spells. They keep her lurking. So if you are a bearer, if someone has passed a rune down to you, listen to my words. Don't get rid of it. Don't trade it for money, because the rune gives you time. Exactly, something you can't buy. And you? What would you do if you found one of them? I am El Documentalista. And this was the true story behind Final Destination.